Hi, I'm Dusty with Magnum Bikes, here to show you how to assemble the Wave. Your Wave is going to come with a box strapped and stapled. So the first thing that you'll need are some cutting tools to cut these straps. Then we'll open up the box. You may want to get a friend's help to lift the bike out of the box, or you can score the box down the edges with a cutting tool or a utility knife and fold open the box. That's how we're going to do it. For this assembly, you'll need a set of Allen or hexagonal wrenches in a 6mm, a 5mm, 4mm, and a 2.5mm, a cutting tool or some dikes, a screwdriver, and a 15 and a 10mm combination or open-ended wrench. Next, we're going to cut off all the zip ties, remove the packing material, and take the bike out of the box and clear our workspace to build it. On the Wave, you'll want to be careful with this zip tie because this cover covers your new integrated display. You may want to make sure to not scratch or cut the display at all. Once you get all the packaging removed from the bike, we're going to cut very carefully this zip tie that holds your keys to the electrical. Being mindful not to cut any of the electrical or hydraulic hoses. The keys are only needed to remove the battery, not to operate the bike. So we'll put these aside for now and I'll show you how to do that at the end. You'll also want to take note that everything came with your bike. Your Wave should have come with an accessory and charger box. Inside this box is your headlight with mount, derailleur guard, an AirTag or M-Tag compatible bell, a cover plate for your stem, a set of right and left pedals, and your charger box. If any of those things are missing, reach out to Magnum Bikes customer support and we'll get whatever was missing replaced. The first thing we're going to do is rotate the stem up. The stem is adjustable on this bike so that we can install the plate that covers the electrical here, and then we'll move on to installing the handle. This is the stem plate. Comes with a little 2.5mm Allen bolt. I'm going to put that aside for a moment. And you want to grab your 5mm Allen wrench to loosen the stem here on the side. Once the stem is loose enough, you can see that you can adjust it here, and it can adjust quite a bit depending on how you can see the display and where you want your controls. I'm just going to put it up in the middle of the range here. Next, I'm going to install the handlebar, removing these 4 bolts from the faceplate with my 4mm Allen wrench. Just go ahead and remove these bolts all the way. Then we're going to rotate the handlebar up into the stem, being mindful that the electrical fits through this gap here and isn't pinched by the handlebar. And then I'm going to place the stem plate back on and loosely install the top 2 bolts. We'll install the lower bolts with the headlight mount in just a moment. The headlight on your Wave has the mounts already included on it, which are these 2 metal brackets here. Those fit into the lower holes of the stem faceplate. So sliding those holes up into line with the stem faceplate, then I'm going to install these bolts through the stem faceplate and the headlight mount. For this step and all steps, really, a ball tip hexagonal wrench is quite useful if you have one so that you can come at an angle. Now that I know those bolts are through my headlight mount, I'm actually going to tighten the bottom bolts first to make sure that my headlight is totally secure. Taking note that this little crosshairs is centered in the stem. Once the lower bolts are tight, then you can move on to the upper bolts. And it is important to note on this stem, it says no gap here, but that pertains to the stem when there's not a headlight mount. So we're going to actually ignore that. The key here is we want these bolts tight enough that the handlebar doesn't rotate, and also that your headlight mount is tight through the lower bolts. So that feels good. Next, we're going to move on to the stem electrical cover plate. This little cover plate uses the 2.5mm Allen, and it doesn't tighten very tightly, but you'll notice it has a ridge here in the middle. This is going to split your electrical. So the electrical split into two parts so that they run in the channel, not crimped by the ridge. Part the C of the electrical and then tighten that. Not very tight. It says a 2.5 Newton-meter torque on it, which is moderately tight. With that done, you can remove the light instructions here, and we'll plug in our electrical. It's important to note that the electrical on the bike are all keyed. The different connections have a ridge, and they only fit in one way, so that you're mindful of not hurting the pins, the electrical pins. I'm going to plug in my headlight. I'm going to plug in my display controls, the green one. And in addition to the keying, you can also usually see an arrow as well on one side and usually a logo on the other side. The brake cutoff arrow is black and kind of hard to see, but you'll want to line it up with the arrow that's here on the brake cutoff itself, right next to the hydraulic hose. Now on this Wave, it looks like this spiral hose keeper came slightly disconnected. These keep your cables all kind of wrapped up together, so you can route those how you want. There's also a piece of Velcro that you can utilize to snug up the electrical underneath your stem here. So I'm actually going to undo my Velcro and just kind of wrap it around all this electrical, mainly for aesthetics and also to keep it tight so you don't snag it on anything. It looks like my other brake cutoff on this bike came disconnected too. So that's this black connection. I'm just going to pull a little slack, make sure I line up my arrow. And plug that in as well. Now arrow's black and kind of hard to see, so just make sure you don't force anything. All right, at this stage, we're going to put our front wheel and our fender on the bike. We'll start with the fender. And the fender for your Wave has a tab up top, which snugs in here behind the fork, and then a fender holder that connects on these little bolts on the lower. So the first thing we're going to do is remove, with our 5mm Allen, the bolt on the back of the fork arch. Put that bolt through the tab and screwing it in by hand so as not to cross thread the lowers of your fork. Start tightening that 5mm Allen, then finishing it with the wrench. And then we'll move on with a 4mm to the lower connections. This one's a little tight. Placing these through the fender holder or fender wire. Important to start them by hand so as not to cross thread the lightweight lower here on the fork. These fender holders are a little bit tensioned, so you do have to kind of bend it into place or flex it into place. Depending on the size of your wrench, you'll want to be careful how much you torque these. With a shorter wrench, you can go a little tighter, but with a longer wrench, these would probably only go about 6 Newton-meters, which is not very tight. Next, we're going to install the front wheel. There's a few ways you can do this. If you have a friend to help, you can just lift up the bike, unthread the axle, and have one of you hold the bike while one of you holds the fork. But I'm going to show you how to do it by yourself. We're going to flip the bike upside down. Now on this bike, the display isn't in danger of being damaged because the display is built into the stem here, so you'll just want to be mindful of your controls. I'm going to rotate my throttle down a little bit, maybe my controls down too, and then I'm going to flip the bike upside down. You can use the rear brake to help you. So if you start pulling up on the front end and pull the brake, the bike will stay put. Rock it back. Helps to do this on a rug so you don't scuff your beautiful new bike. But this way, gravity can help you with installing the front wheel. Once you have the bike flipped over, we're going to unthread the axle from the fork, which is your largest Allen that you're using, the 6 millimeter. And the wheel is going to fit into the frame with the disc rotor on the non-drive side of the bike, where the brake caliper is. You want to remove the pad spacer from the brake. And then very carefully watching to make sure the disc rotor fits into the brake pads on the disc rotor. Slide that into place and insert our through axle. And start threading that into the other side. You'll see the torque on this is listed on the bolt, which says 10 to 15 Newton meters. Again, tighter than you would on the fender, but not crazy tight. Not as tight as you might like install your pedals. I'm gonna spin my wheel to make sure my brake doesn't rub. It's perfect. Now I'm gonna put the bike right side up and put the kickstand down. Again, you can use the brake to help you. At this point, with the bike right side up, I may revisit where my handlebar sits and my stem adjustment. You'll want your handlebar to be moderately parallel with the ground. One thing to consider on the Wave is where the display is going to be visible from the saddle. So actually, for me to see my display, I'm gonna go a little bit further down. This is a little bit tighter than we did our axle for our front wheel. It's gonna be 18.5 Newton meters maximum. Depends on the size of your wrench, of course. And at this point, I'm gonna right my controls and my throttle, and then tighten those with an Allen underneath the controls for your display, and with an Allen wrench on the underside of the throttle. At this point, we're also going to install our AirTag M-tag holder, which is a bell, but it's a pretty nifty little bell. That way you can put an AirTag or M-tag in there and you can have GPS location on your bike so that you know where your kids are riding it or if it was stolen. And this is going to be a Phillips screwdriver. And then you just open the clamp and put it anywhere you want on the handlebar. I'm going to put mine over on the left. Since my right hand will be busy doing the shifter and the throttle, I like it over here. The AirTag or M-tag is actually under the base of the bell, and you unscrew that to the left, and you'll notice that inside there's 2 foam pads and a space for your AirTag M-tag. I would put 1 foam tag on the underside and 1 tag on the upside, 1 pad on the upper side, and then put your AirTag back inside. No one will ever know. Next, we'll install our pedals using a 15 millimeter wrench. The pedals are labeled R and L, right and left, which is from the rider's perspective. And it helps to grease the threads just a little bit. You can use marine grease, all-purpose grease. You can even use a little petroleum jelly if that's all you have laying around. Right, left, and I'm gonna start these again, like most things on a bike, threading by hand. The right pedal threads to the right, and the left pedal actually is reverse threaded and would thread to the left if you're looking at it from this side. But they're threaded so that you can hold the spindle and back pedal to tighten, which is kind of fun. And only using the wrench at the very end to get your pedals nice and snug. Depending on the size of the wrench, you'll really want to tighten these down because you don't want a pedal to come loose. Next, we're going to install an optional piece of equipment. This is your derailleur guard. Now this protects the derailleur, your gear derailleur, from getting damaged or bent if the bike falls over or if you run into something or lean it against a tree. Some people don't like these for aesthetic purposes, and with the kickstand, maybe it's not as needed, but it certainly is there to protect your derailleur. And it mounts right here to the rear fender stay bolt and this other bolt dedicated for the derailleur guard. We'll do that with our 4 millimeter Allen wrench. The derailleur guard is flat, so I will put it underneath the fender mount, flush against the frame. And be mindful that these threads are in the metal frame of your bike, so you want to start them by hand to be careful of cross threading. We're almost ready to ride, You'll want to check the air pressure in your tires. The recommended air pressure is on the sidewall. And for the Wave, it says 30 to 65 pressure, 65 being the max. I usually like to run it in the middle of the range, but it depends on the conditions and of course your weight. These feel at about 40 PSI, so they feel really good to me, actually. Next, I'll show you how the keys work, how to remove the battery, and where to charge the bike. The Wave features an integrated battery that fits into the down tube of the bike. To remove it, insert the key to the lock and turn counterclockwise. There's a secondary step. There's a little spring lever on the top of the battery. You have to pull that down to get the battery to fully release. Then once you have the battery out, you can charge it off the bike or on the bike, there. You also have this handy carrying case and a battery indicator. Why would you take the battery out of the bike? Makes the bike about 8 or 9 pounds lighter. Also, you'd want to store it inside in the house in the winter if it gets cold where you live, and also pull it off to make it lighter weight, putting on a bike rack, or if you're storing the bike in a very hot place, like in a trailer or in a car, you might want to remove the battery then too. To reinstall, we're going to start with the flat pin side inside the bike and push until it clicks. And make sure you remove your key. Separate these keys, you don't need them to operate the bike, just to remove the battery. To charge the bike, you'll remove your charger, which has 2 pieces. The power cord that plugs into the wall, and the connection for the bike. When you plug this charger into the wall, this light will turn green. When you plug it into the bike and it's charging, it will turn red. The battery is fully charged when this light turns green again. You would plug it into this port here when it's on the bike, and make sure to cover that port and close this little door once you're riding so debris and moisture don't get in there. Make sure and store your charger somewhere safe and dry. And it does get a little bit warm when it's charging, so make sure that it's on a concrete floor or something else that's not going to be flammable. At this point, I'm going to do some final checks and make sure that nothing's loose on my bike, and make sure that my bike turns on by pressing and holding the lower power button below the down arrow on the lower edge of the display. And now I'm ready to try my first ride. If at any point in this assembly you have a problem, you're missing something, you're not sure what step you're on, feel free to reach out to customer support. Magnum has Salt Lake City, Utah-based customer support that is open, answers the phone. There's always a human there to help you. You can call us at 323-375-2666 from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. You can also email us, info@magnumbikes.com. And of course, this assembly video, an owner's manual, and many more resources are available for you on our website at magnumbikes.com.